Muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a la plenaria de clausura del Festival de Datos de Cartagena. Les pedimos a todos que tomen asiento, que apaguen sus teléfonos celulares o cualquier otro equipo de comunicación que pueda intervenir con el desarrollo del evento. Muchas gracias. También los invitamos a tener en cuenta el siguiente hashtag para las redes sociales, hashtag Data 2015 y la página web Cartagena Data Fest 2015.org. Como moderador de la plenaria invitamos a Johannes Jutting, director de secretariado de Paris 21.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to see you all back. I'm actually a little surprised to see you all back in good shape. I think we had a fantastic evening yesterday, and I think we can all thank the organizers for this wonderful evening, the dinner and the dancing. We are now coming to unfortunately, we are now coming to the end of the Data Festival. I think we would all agree we could continue like this, but unfortunately, everything comes to an end at some point in time. And this is a very important session. It's taking stock of what we have learned over the last 1.5 days, or 2 days, 1.5 days? 2.5 days. Oh, it feels so intense. It's like 2 years. So this is a very important session because we want to take stock what we learned, and we will also be talking how to go forward from here. So we have split up this session into 2 parts. I will be moderating the first part, basically looking at the 6 tracks that we had, starting with counting what counts, then the track on big data, track on opportunities and challenges of the data revolution for national statistics. That will be the first part, and we will be hearing a quick summary of what happened, but most importantly also how to go forward. Then I will open up for comments and questions on these first 3 tracks, and then we will have an opportunity to listen to the last 3 tracks: data journalism, data capsule, and accountability and citizens engagement. So really the idea is to hear from what happened and where do we go from here. And then thereafter, we will be moving away from here, and then we will have Anne-Brigitte moderating a panel, more talking then also about the political implications and also about concrete next steps. So without further ado, let's start with the first track, Counting What Counts, and we have Emma Saman, who will report back. And Emma, counting what counts, that sounds, what do we do with those things or with those people whom we can't count? So did you find any solutions? What was discussed in your track?
Thank you. So as the title suggests, in the track we discussed 3 themes which relate to the idea of making all people count. The first one took this idea fairly literally in focusing on the collection and use of disaggregated data by gender and by other important characteristics, as well as hyperlocal data, in the words of one of the panelists. So in this session, the starting premise was that our data collection can be considered to be structured like a pyramid, with censuses at the bottom, with administrative systems, civil registration systems, and household surveys at the very top. And that new technologies give the possibility to add new layers to that pyramid. But we were also quite sensitive to the value of that data, the tremendous potential that it affords, and we had many examples of how that's led to some very innovative and creative policy solutions. Equally, we discussed the risks of that big data has huge potential, but like plutonium, in the words of one panelist, it has the potential to leak and to contaminate. There are risks associated with re-identifying people, with the cost of collecting this data, the fact that estimates may be less precise, and that, of course, digital penetration, as we know, is incomplete. So more broadly, if we have too much disaggregated data, there's a risk of losing perspective. We may not disaggregate according to the right categories. We may end up with so much data that we don't know what to do with it. But the conclusion, in essence, was that disaggregated data in itself is not good or bad. It's a tool, like a hammer. It's how we use it that matters. Then we went on to discuss people's values and perceptions. The starting premise there was that we're very good at telling people that their lives are improved, but less so in asking people what they think about this and in basing policies and interventions on those perceptions. So we considered the tremendous value in integrating people's values and perceptions. Again, a couple of points of caution, that we need to be cautious in interpreting these data, that people in deprived circumstances may have adapted to these circumstances and their perceptions may reflect this, and that we need to be very careful about whose voices are being heard, that in particular, how we can ensure that we're reflecting the voices of the most vulnerable. And then finally, we considered how these new ideas about measurement can be taken up by governments and by other actors, and with particular focus on this agenda of leaving no one behind. And here for me, we talked about many elements of a good strategy, the need to focus on clear priorities, on seizing opportune political moments, appealing to a broad range of stakeholders, identifying political champions and activists. I think the most interesting notion for me was that often we base our strategies on having a supply-driven issue and then thinking about how to communicate it. An important notion was the need to understand as well the demand for new data and for new measurement ideas and to act in alignment with it, so that we need to really focus on what the data needs are and be more outcome and demand-led. Thank you.
Thank you for this great and concise summary. Maybe as a follow-up question, many people would maybe start in terms of thinking data revolution, because this is an event about data revolution, and many people would maybe say, well, the data revolution could be a tool to really measure and to find those who are otherwise left behind or whom we can't count, as you said. But you seem to say there are a lot of obstacles as well. Is there anything that we can take forward? I mean, if we think about the data revolution in our thinking, and what would you suggest from the discussions that you had in terms of for the discussion on the data revolution? How can we, what are the next necessary steps to address this important problem?
Yeah. No, I didn't mean to suggest in any sense that our discussion was a negative one. The bulk of the discussion was focused on very positive next steps in terms of the potential for expanding civil registration of vital statistics systems, for example, for exploiting administrative data more fully, particularly for taking advantage of the huge potential that the proliferation of new technologies affords us. So we did focus very much on that, even on household surveys and the potentials there, although also some cautions. Yeah, I think it was very much a focus on these new technologies and the potential that they offer us, both for collecting more disaggregated data and for having a more nuanced and frequent reflections on people's values. And in terms of taking it forward, I think that it's essentially speaking to the need when we think about this SDG agenda and this idea of leaving no one behind, what it actually means in practice. So we spoke of, a number of very specific implications of that.
Great. You mentioned a couple of times the word big data. Now I'm sitting next to Mr. Big Data. Emmanuel, welcome. So could you just give us a quick run through your track?
Sure, thank you. Hi, good morning, everybody. So the big data and development track was held on the second day. It was, a really fantastic, I found, very engaging, thought-stimulating track or session. So the sort of 4 key points I think that came out of the session. First is that there's still, of course, a lot of excitement around big data and people. And so it's not like the bubble hasn't bursted yet and may not ever burst. So would still stress the sort of really the level of excitement and fascination around the topic. At the same time, the second point is that what I've seen over the past couple of years working in this space, and which was clear from the session, is that there has been a great deal of maturation of the space over the past couple of months, and a couple of months, maybe 6, 8, 12. So what I mean by maturation is that the sort of early the sort of a bit simplistic arguments and controversies of the early years are sort of fading away and are giving room to like more complex, more nuanced, deeper understanding of big data as a social phenomenon. And it was very clear from many presentations and discussions. We talked about like the politics of big data. We talked about issues of empowerment. We talked about issues of capacities. So I just want to like stress that it came out very clearly, this sort of like maturation. One of our panelists, Robin Scott, tweeted after the session that the big thing about I'm reading, the big thing about big data is not the data, it's the power of the ecosystems around it. And I think it's sort of summarized, or in my mind, it sort of summarizes this notion of like intellectual and practical maturation. Then another thing, so we had two really, really great presentations of two people that I described as some of the brightest young minds in the field. So Yves Alexandre and Bogdan, who are here somewhere, and they were in a sense exemplary of some of the really like hard nuts in the space. One was on using social media data to, in a sense, better track the SDGs, or how you could use big data for measurement purposes. With lots of very exciting like avenues. So in a sense, to me, that's the measurement angle. It's how big data can be used to measure, monitor progress in general, and hugely, hugely important. The second one was around the limits of privacy. And that gets to, in a sense, the implications of big data, the sort of really deep political nature and processes that are at play with big data. And the 2-second like summary of this presentation is that it's not possible. We cannot talk about anonymized data in a big data era. It just doesn't exist. So the point is, what is the balance that we as a society are willing to accept? What is the trade-off that we're willing to accept between privacy and progress, between privacy and security, for instance? And then we went into, we had two regional sessions, and to give a very high-level like summary of we had a focus on Latin America and a focus on Africa. And it was very, very interesting to see the differences and complementarities both within these two regions and, of course, between the two regions. And it's actually the first time that I see in a conference like these regional perspectives being like brought on at the forefront of the discussion. Latin America seems to be very focused on issues of partnerships, capacities. Africa, as one panelist mentioned, Africa is of course 54 countries, and Latin America is 37. So of course we talk in very high level in terms. But in Africa, the discussion was extremely political. Like words like neocolonialism came up, extractive industry came up. So there was really this sort of. And it wasn't only the only thing that came up, but it came up very strongly. The risk of big data becoming an extractive industry. And last, in terms of like the future, I think the two key concepts I think that came out were connections and capacities. Connections are connections within the regions and connections between the regions around training, capacity development, but really this notion of an ecosystem to be created with connections linking different institutions, different actors, and different considerations. And the second, capacities. I think it's clear, and we came to sort of conclusion, that there is a huge need, a huge gap to train the current and next generations, not just of policymakers, but of citizens that are able and willing to engage and to shape the future of big data. So this need for training and capacity development, not just on the technical side, but also to give awareness of the deeply political dimension of big data is huge.
Thanks. I can just confirm, I had the privilege or the pleasure also to be to listen into your track. My impression was nevertheless that it seems if you want to take part in a big data discussion, and you seem to say, and you also published a couple of papers about this, it's a new ecosystem, it's not only about the data, it's about something very different, and it's very important to engage also with ordinary citizens, laymen, to reach out to a broader public. Now, in all honesty, I have to say, if I look or if I listen to big data debates, sometimes I have the feeling I have to have a PhD from Harvard or MIT Data Lab just to be able to follow the discussions, because it's on such a technical level, and these people explain and talk about things that I can't really relate to. So to some extent, you argue for being inclusive, but you don't argue, you even keep people outside as a representative of the community. So how do you want to address that problem? We didn't talk about that question for... Sorry.
Okay, so if we take, I mean, I really think, and I may be wrong. I mean, this is less like my, personal, honest, like humble opinion. I really think that what we're facing, not just with big data, with like digital change in general, is like a historical. It has the potential to be a social revolution. So if we take a historical perspective and think of the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, issues of literacy was central to the advent and to the emergence of the Industrial Revolution, and it was both a consequence and a cause of the Industrial Revolution. And I think the same thing will happen or should happen. So there's a lot of discussion around this notion of data literacy, big data literacy. But being data literate, and we could go at length, and actually we were writing a paper on what does it mean, it doesn't mean becoming a computer scientist with a PhD from MIT. There needs to be different people with different set of skills. And it doesn't mean being data literate doesn't mean being able to do predictive analytics or to understand the ins and outs of machine learning. It's just about being more aware of what big data is, being aware of the risks to privacy, for instance. We all check boxes of like consent without reading, and I think there needs to be a sort of like chain where the sort of like layman has at least access to some people that can explain and that can teach them the sort of basic skills, but they don't have to become computer scientists at the PhD level.
Okay, I'm glad to hear this. That's very convincing. So before moving to the third track about the opportunities and challenges for National Statistical Office, and to turn to Bruce, just I will be open up for questions, comments, and answers after Bruce reporting back. So please think already about questions and comments you may have, and maybe additions to the first three tracks. So Bruce, do you want to tell us a little bit about track 3?
Well, good morning, everyone. And if you could, just for the next 4 minutes, put on a hat. Believe that you yourself are the head of a national statistical organization, and we represent every nation in the world. So just put that hat on for a minute and see if you can hear a few words what happened during this track. It started off, frankly, a bit slowly. But as we move forward, what I found is kind of a building block. And if I were to just look at my 4 final points, the words capacity, engagement, literacy, and partnership are areas that we discussed. And I'll come back to that in just a second. And I see it building on the earlier track. So there was a steady progression. It was a bit of a slow start. We reminded ourselves of this fantastic work on A World That Counts. We're reminded of the principles and the standards, the capacity and resources, the governance and leadership, and the technology and innovation. We just have to remind ourselves we're not starting from scratch. The fantastic launch of the roadmap, so we've got ourselves already guidance on what it is that we need to do in terms of capacity for national statistical offices. The first part of the early morning track was a bit of that repetition. Then we moved into a second session. We had 5 great panel members in the first part of this session and 5 people in a fishbowl in the second part. And things started to get more lively. I think what happened there that was really beautiful was we started to really get into the detail that you may remember the early morning comment, the old and tired official statistics. So we had the national statistical officers kind of on one side of the fishbowl, and we had citizen and civil society and engagement on the other. We really had a tension, a palpable tension in why NSO isn't standing up to its full responsibility, responding to individual citizen needs. It was really nice. And I just want to mention that tension, as it matured and different people came into the fishbowl, we saw the tension starting to resolve itself. That discussion itself is something that we want to be bringing alive going forward, and I think a lot of this festival has given us a stage for that discussion. So just on capacity, it came up throughout. We don't have enough capacity, and we've heard that from national statistical offices since a census was done in this house in 1778, in this very house, in Cartagena, the first ever census, and I'm sure they complained they didn't have enough money to do it well. The same thing now. We don't have enough money. We don't have capacity. So definitely we need a roadmap that clearly identifies that capacity and how to strengthen it. In terms of literacy, we heard about literacy. So it's the supply and demand. We need literacy, of course, amongst policymakers and parliamentarians. And Paulie left the stage here yesterday to go talk to Parliament in South Africa. And he also identified in several occasions why it's so important to talk to parliamentarians. But we need literacy across the full range of engagement, from individual citizens all the way up. And that's going to take a different kind of a work and different kinds of investments than before. And then on the issue of engagement, right now, and we see 400 people from different professions, we're all talking quite a different language, but it starts to come together for the first time. And I think that's what this festival offers us, is a chance to have that engagement. And it leads to the final bit, is we've got to structure the engagement. We've got to keep it alive and drive it forward in some kind of partnership. And in our session, and as some of the final notes on the fishbowl, we talked about not waiting for somebody to tell us to have a partnership, but going home immediately and looking to establish that kind of partnership forum, that engagement between national statistical offices, perhaps as the hub of a wheel, and reaching out to all the different actors, private sector, the line ministries, our global partners, as well as civil society, and making sure there's a regular engagement, looking at how we can take the data revolution forward. So there were a couple very tangible steps as well. It really was a good session, and I want to thank everybody for their active engagement in that session. Thanks.
I liked very much your thought experiment, and having also participated and moderated the first part, if I would put myself into the shoes of a national statistical office head, I would sense that this world is unfair to me. Because, I mean, there are so high demands on what I should do, in what kind of time. I should engage, I should reach out to citizens, I should, and I was impressed by the colleague from the Washington University who explained to us very clearly in terms of the standards and how complicated it even is to measure up traditional data sources, and how even more complicated it is to measure up sources from non-traditional sources and traditional data sources. So on the one hand, we will maybe seeing, I'm a head of a statistical office and I have to comply to all these standards, and then there's the private sector NGOs that just publish data, maybe not complying to these standards. And I think these are the tensions that you were referring to. Were there some discussions on how to deal with, how to relate to those tensions, beyond just talking?
I think that was actually a huge part of the tension that we felt. There are already insurmountable demands just simply doing your annual reporting and doing the traditional and routine and boring official work of a national statistical office. And suddenly we're asking them to increase their engagement with all these different partners instantly, without capacity, without resources. It's a totally unrealistic request. And that's why I've asked you to put on those hats. So the final point is partnerships. It does not need to be a heavy-duty reformulation of how we work, but at least everyone engaged in data and the revolution and with a concern for sustainable development can meet, as we do in many different partnerships at national level, looking forward very simply, what is our vision? Everyone counts. What does that mean? How do we address the vulnerable? Who is engaged? National Statistical Office, private sector, line ministry, civil society. Who is doing what? It doesn't necessarily mean NSO needs the capacity, but through partnership, we have a common vision, 5-year, 15-year. We have annual collaborative mechanisms making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And we always focus on the greater good of the individual, of the rights, of the equity, the driving force behind the data revolution. And in that way, the NSO can play a convening role. It needs to open its mind and heart and soul. And we saw that in the tension, because we saw some very willing, and I want to thank our colleagues from Philippines, our colleagues from here in Colombia who are really already very willing to start that engagement. It's free. It costs a cup of coffee and a routine, strategic quarterly set of meetings so that you can have that kind of engagement, and it's not NSO alone, it's a partnership moving us forward.
Great. Can I just check in terms of maybe not, we will not have probably at this moment the time for having a longer conversation about what you heard, but is there, can I see if there is any violent objection on what has been said, or if we have missed anything, then I would cite a raise of hand. There is a person who, hopefully not a violent objection. Edilberto.
Of course not. It's not an objection. And it's much more, it's a little bit of a comment. In the fishbowl meeting that Bruce mentioned, it is true that we started in a tone of conflict in a way, but I took that as a provocative starting point, because I don't believe that it's tension. I think that it's artificial. I think that we all agree that big data is not magic, but we know that big data is there. So what we need to do, and this is something that we had the chance to talk during the coffee breaks and the dinner set, it is about having more examples of what big data is. We keep talking about data sources, new data sources. What are those data sources? What is the inventory of data sources that we talk about? What is big data? Because it's not that we are saying that census and voter registration, it's how do we move in that process, but we need more examples. And there are plenty of them. The second comment is about the institutional changes, and there are layers of that. In one or different occasion, we talk about that. What is the data revolution? What is the implication of the data revolution? And we're talking about institutional changes. We're talking about human resources adaptability. And finally, one thing that I'm very worried about and that I didn't hear about, that is the competition for resources. We know that the data, the finance for data is always the last one that is considered. We heard about examples of statistical offices that are not properly funded because it's the last one. The statistical office always ends up with whatever is left. And we cannot allow to see what happened in Africa when we have the epidemics on HIV and AIDS. And all the institutions went and helped the deal with the HIV and AIDS. But at what cost? Most of the money was on vaccination and nutrition went there. Mm-hmm. And okay. we saw what happened. Anyways, that couple of comments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. I can take two. Eric and the gentleman from the ODI Institute.
Thanks. I didn't, in the summaries, hear anything said about open data, transparency, open government, all of which have been driving forces for democratizing the data.
That will come, Eric, don't worry. We have still 3 tracks, and we have the accountability citizens track, and I'm pretty sure it will come. But thanks already for alerting it, but it will come, I hope. Can I see from the Open Data Institute?
Great, just hopefully a very quick point, and it's a bit of
one point, please, because
one point, and it's about data literacy, and it's a bit of a mantra for me. I'd like us to stop talking about big data. I'd like us to talk about data. I don't care whether it's big, medium, or small. I'd like us to focus on the impact. The critical thing I'd like to focus on is whether it's open, or closed, or can be shared. And I'd like us to change our language. Let's stop talking about big data. Let's start talking about open or closed, or private data and shared data.
Okay. Good point. Well taken. So let's move to the next 3 tracks that we had. We had one track on data journalism, and it's Eugenio who will report back on that track.
Sí, buenas tardes, buenos días. ¿Todos me siguen en español? Okay. Bueno, lo primero, la sesión de ayer la definían en Twitter como una reunión de bichos raros. Así que como representante de esos bichos raros me toca hablar en un idioma distinto al que todos estaban usando. Inicialmente lo que quiero darles una gran felicitación a todos, porque si uno revisa, por ejemplo, los datos que están ahorita en Social Mention sobre cómo se ha movido el Twitter en función de las etiquetas que hemos estado usando, el Data 2015 fue varias veces trending topic ayer e incluso estuvo posicionado en muchos países, casi que en todos los continentes, así que si la idea era generar relaciones, interconectar personas, interconectar organizaciones, pues la tarea se hizo y con nota sobresaliente. Así que creo que un aplauso para todos ustedes porque todos tuiteando lograron ese objetivo. Lo otro, y ya para entrar de lleno en la discusión de los bichos raros, en líneas generales creo que llevamos el debate hacia, pareciera que, y me sumo a la petición del Big Data, con la discusión del Big Data, etiqueta que casi no se posicionó, por cierto, en diferencia de Data 2015, etcétera, pareciera que el Big Data está dividiendo al mundo en dos grupos. Los que tienen acceso a datos y pueden hacer visualizaciones y pueden hacer trabajos grandiosos como los que vimos anoche, y la parte del mundo donde no hay datos, no hay acceso a datos. De hecho, veo al amigo de Bolivia aquí y me gustaría, en función de que está aquí el amigo de Bolivia, proponerles un simple ejercicio. Este es peligroso, sobre todo para las personas que se quedaron hasta muy tarde anoche en la fiesta en el castillo, así que tengan cuidado al realizar este ejercicio. Cierren los ojos durante 10 segundos. Por favor, ciérrenlos. Así se siente trabajar con datos en algunos países, no hay nada. Y la discusión la estamos llevando a todo lo que podemos hacer con gobiernos que generan datos, con gobiernos que pueden, a los que se les puede solicitar información. Sin embargo, el debate no lo estamos centrando en qué hacemos en donde no tenemos estadísticas. Y qué hacemos además para evaluar las estadísticas que algunas veces ofrecen los gobiernos. De hecho, los índices de pobreza o los indicadores de pobreza de los estados son el mejor indicador de cómo deberíamos desconfiar de algunas estadísticas, sobre todo cómo se están midiendo esos indicadores de pobreza que estamos después utilizando para visualizaciones increíbles. En la otra parte de la discusión la llevamos hacia preguntarnos a quién queremos llegar. Insisto, ayer vimos unas visualizaciones increíbles en la noche, durante los 2 días y medio de debate hemos visto trabajos maravillosos, pero son trabajos que van dirigidos a un público especializado. Nos estamos olvidando de un público no especializado. De hecho, no sé si la gente de Social Tick en México está acá, pero ellos tienen unas presentaciones muy buenas sobre cómo tratar de vender información en datos o cómo dar información en datos hacia el público especializado y cómo hacerlo hacia el público que no es especializado. Porque las visualizaciones, la descarga de datos, la descarga de bases de datos va a un grupo muy selecto de personas. También hay que pensar en aquellos individuos a los que queremos llegarle, a los que queremos explicarles situaciones que no saben usar Excel, no pueden descargar archivos muy pesados, no tienen ningún tipo de educación en números, en estadística, entonces hay que hacer las cosas más sencillas. De hecho, antes de hacer una visualización, deberíamos preguntarnos a quién queremos informar, si esa información va a ser solo para público especializado y qué es lo que esa audiencia debe saber, entender o reflexionar, qué es lo que nos va a permitir al final saber qué datos o no vamos a estar utilizando. Ya para cerrar, para no encadenarme mucho, porque creo que hay todavía debates interesantes que dar. Ayer tratamos de, por lo menos desde el punto de vista periodístico, tratar de posicionar una etiqueta, sobre todo entre los que generan información y data. No más PDFs, por favor. No más PDFs. Váyanse con ese, repitiendo, no más PDFs, no más PDFs. No nos funcionan. Es terrible trabajar datos con PDF. Gracias.
Okay. I think it's great. We have already one very practical suggestion to take down. No use of PDFs. I think we will all be happy, and our IT managers will all be happy if we stick to your advice. Let me just, my impression is coming more from a researcher angle. So many of us are involved in writing reports, research pieces, and I recall that when I worked at the OECD Development Center, we produced a report on informal employment, informal is normal, and 1 year's report, and then we came to our media people and they said it was all fine, where's the headline number? And we didn't know what they meant. And what I can see is then we found a number of how many people are in informal employment. We calculated somehow, and then it got a lot of attraction because that was the headline figure that made it into the media. My impression is that if I'm now, or if I see colleagues in international organizations, but also researchers, we are really very hard pushed to come up with one number. So to some extent, you guys have already succeeded us in making us using a number, a headline figures. Would you confirm this?
Bueno, el problema con el periodismo es que ayer incluso en el panel de periodismo de datos estaba unas personas representantes de la ONU que hicieron trabajo humanitario en Haití, por ejemplo, y se quejaba de que los medios siempre reflejaban las cifras negativas de la ayuda humanitaria a Haití. Porque los medios, bueno, las malas noticias venden, y lamentablemente es así, y es parte del negocio. Ahora bien, cuando uno quiere que su informe sea publicado en los medios, hay que poner los datos en perspectiva. Los informes están llenos de porcentajes. Decíamos ayer, por ejemplo, que para el ciudadano común y corriente entender 80% es muy complicado. Es preferible decirle 8 de cada 10 personas, 80 de cada 100. Hay que tratar de aterrizar la cifra para que el común denominador, que son la mayoría de los habitantes de este planeta, puedan en realidad captar la cifra, puedan en realidad interiorizar el impacto de la cifra. Lo otro es siempre dar información que se pueda poner en contexto, porque los informes llegan, sí, y dicen, hay una inversión de $1.000 millones. Ajá, y eso es mucho, eso es poco, en comparación a qué. Hay que siempre tener un dato contra qué contrastarlo, porque si no tenemos un dato, aparte, ¿alguien se puede imaginar aquí lo que son $1.000 millones? ¿Alguien tiene certeza de lo que son 1.000 millones? Para el público en general, decir $1.000 millones, decir 2.000 o decir 10.000, termina siendo lo mismo. O sea, es una cantidad tan absurda de dinero que nadie logra interiorizarla. Siempre hay que poner los datos en perspectiva. Así que la mejor forma de lograr publicar información, o que se publique la información, es que esa información tenga algún tipo de perspectiva que la gente logre entender y que el periodista logre entender, porque además no todos los periodistas están especializados en áreas tan específicas, valga la redundancia, como estadística, matemática o economía. A veces también hay que dar un poquito más, ver lo que el público quiere consumir o lo que necesita consumir. No más PDFs, por favor.
Great, really fantastic examples. That directly leads to, you said we need to somehow use and play. So data capsule, that was an exciting event. I just looked into the room, everybody was busy. Emmanuel, can you tell us what happened in that room?
Yeah, sure. So I will tell you what happened in the room. I will tell you also a little bit about what happened outside of the room before the event, because I think it's important to, like for me to just like explain the process that and the different steps that went into the preparation of the capsule, and also maybe very quickly explain the very term. I mean, I got many questions about what does it mean, like a data capsule. I mean, I won't go at length, but essentially, it was the merging of two different events that we wanted to organize, and I think it's just telling that it took quite a bit of work to be able to sort of merge these two events. One was called a data expedition, and the other was called an innovation capsule. And we just decided when we were going to merge it that we needed to merge it first, and then that we were going to take half and half. But what I'm getting at is that it was really so like a team work. If you look at the brochure, there were 8 partners involved, 4 from Latin America, 1 from Africa Gathering, and so Data Pop Alliance as a sort of umbrella, and so the sort of key objective was to not do a hackathon. Initially, it was okay. This is going to be like the hackathon part. We checked the box. We've done a hackathon, and we didn't want to do a hackathon. We wanted to do something that was focused on participation and learning and just like having fun. So the sort of awareness raising, capacity building components were key to the data capsule. Now, what we did in the data capsule, and actually I should say that in particular Social TIC, MinTIC, and DANE in particular were instrumental in the success of the capsule, is that social TIC, we got data on criminality, we got data on use of time in Cartagena. So we had 4 data sets, and teams were assembled with at least one coder in each of the teams. So to get to your question of do you need a PhD? Well, in a sense, yes, you need one PhD. I mean, you need someone who has a PhD or who's like a data scientist on the teams, but they were also domain experts, social scientists and others. And they were asked to work to choose their data set and to come up with a policy or research question and try to see in the data how they would approach the problem and what would be the different steps that they would go through to try and get some insight or get to a potential policy recommendation. So that was like the process. And what was very interesting and exciting is just to see the diversity within each teams, diversity in all, like along all dimensions that we can think of, and just to see the excitement of people being really, I mean, having fun and being really interested in learning how to code. I mean, for some people, it was the first time they were working with Python, or they were seeing like some lines of codes. So the discussion was extremely lively. We also had mini burgers, and that was like a good addition to the capsula. And in terms of outcomes, I think this model of trying to do events, so discrete events, but where you don't have 50 PhDs in the room, where you have a real diversity and like a blending of skills and perspectives, is something that was to me very valuable. So in a sense, it's maybe to sort of invent the new generations of hackathons, where it's not so much about like crunching the data, but it's really bringing people together.
Great. What I liked about this Cartagena Festival is that we also, I mean, we talk about an exciting topic, but the process of how we talk about, many of us going to lots of conferences, and it's often a very stylized, I mean, it's all sterile way. There's frontal presentations, we do PowerPoints, and there's not much time for really exchange. And what I found amazing to experiment with this kind of data capsule event. So I think that's something to take away maybe as we talk about a World Forum on Sustainable Development Data, not only to talk about content, but also how do we engage? How do we create a forum that we can all participate in the discussion? So that seems, I mean, we tried the fishbowl, which worked out very nicely. So it's also doing conferences much differently than we did in the past. So I'm very happy to see that. Last but not least, and this participatory engagement that directly leads us to the last track about citizenship, engagement and accountability. Kate, would you like to guide us through your findings?
Sure, thanks. So we had a really exciting panel and session on Monday afternoon with a lot of people involved. It was great. The first session, we really tried to understand and unpack some lessons from experience on how citizens can be engaged in the collection and use of data to strengthen accountability at the global level, at the regional level, at the national level, at the local level. So we got some lessons from those different levels of how data has been used to really try and promote accountability and the sort of transformative change we want to see. We then had a really exciting rapid fire session where we had 10 new initiatives launched and discussed. Initiatives that are trying to really facilitate meaningful citizen engagement around data, accountability, citizen monitoring. So that was a really exciting session. I think it was a real challenge for the 10 of us that presented to do this pitch in 2 minutes, but I think it was a really useful session for us, and it enabled us to really contextualize in a very concrete way some of those broader discussions we had in the first session. The third session we had was really trying to identify some opportunities for collaboration, partnership to make sure that the data revolution is a revolution that has people, citizens, and accountability at the very core. So what are some of the lessons? What were some of the key highlights for the session for me? The first, I think, the real one-sentence highlight is that data is not a magic bullet. It's not data that's going to change the world, it's people that change the world. So that was a really strong theme that came throughout our session that I think was really, really important for us to emphasize. It's not data for data's sake. As I said, it's data to change the world. And there's lots of really great examples of citizens using data to amplify their voice, to empower the communities that they're working with, and to drive the change we want to see. So what did we hear about? We heard about a really exciting initiative that Wingu from Argentina, an exciting conference that they will have in June on connecting data, technology, experts with civil society organizations, activists, that haven't really been in this space traditionally before. We heard from Restless and the launch of the big idea and the work they're doing across the world, which was really exciting. We heard from Macaya here in Colombia and the really important work they're doing to open public libraries and use public libraries as a key way to get information to communities. We heard about the great work Map Kibera happening in Kenya. We heard about the work Twaweza is doing to have the first representative mobile phone survey in Africa. So there's some really, really exciting examples of people and organizations using data to really demand accountability and drive the change we want to see. I think another really important point is that organizations and citizens are doing this in really different ways. So in some examples, we heard about technology being a really important driver of the way that data is collected and used, but we also heard about the really exciting work that UWEZO and ASA has been doing on citizen-led education assessments. And this is using a pen and paper and having people going into households to collect this data. So, you know, there's a real spectrum of how this data is generated and collected, and I think that's really important for us to remember. There are a number of different ways that data can be collected: paper, SMS, technology. It's a spectrum, and we can't forget that. But there was also a real concern, I think, in our sessions about data and technology potentially reinforcing existing inequities, and that was a concern that really came through the sessions. We really need to make sure that the data revolution closes those gaps rather than widens those gaps. Data can disempower people. Data can be used by powerful groups to maybe promote or drive forward things that citizens do not want to see. We heard about examples, Tanzania again, of civic space closing and legislation that's being pushed that really disables citizens from using and accessing data and information. So there was some concerns in our session around civic space, data, and some discussions about what we really need to make sure we do to ensure that data does drive the change, lead to the revolution we want to see, and doesn't reinforce the inequities that exist. So what were our kind of key takeaways to kind of drive this agenda forward and ensure that the data revolution does have citizens, people, and accountability at the core? I think a key message was that it's easier than ever for citizens to generate data, produce data, and that's really exciting. It's easier than ever for citizens to use data in their advocacy and campaigning, and so that's also really exciting. So there are a lot of opportunities. You know, it wasn't a negative session, it was a really positive session, and people were really excited about how we can take this forward. I think my final point about partnership and collaboration, and this is something that our colleague Muchiri Nyaga from Kenya really tried to bring home to us, is that one thing that this talk of the data revolution has done is it's widened the tent and broadened the data ecosystem. It's bringing together people that didn't maybe 2 years talk together, people that didn't work together, activists, advocates, data technology people, big data people, national statistics officers. So this is really an exciting opportunity. The data ecosystem, the tent has gotten bigger, and we can all work together. And that was a really exciting, there was a lot of excitement in our session about that, about how we can collaborate, how we can partner, how we can work with people, stakeholders, organizations that we maybe didn't typically work with before. But just to end, I think, as I said at the beginning, the key message from our session is that it's not data for data's sake. It's that it's people, not data, that are going to change the world, and we need to make sure that the data revolution has people and citizens at the very heart.
Thank you so much, Kate, for this very energetic summary of your exciting track. I think we are doing good in time. We have heard from the 6 tracks back. I think we have set the stage for the next panel. I would suggest, in terms of, if you have questions and comments, please note them down, and because I think we have to move now to the next panel, and we will have a broader discussion and with the audience again once you had a chance to have the next panelists say a few words, and then we will have an open discussion. But please join me in thanking for these fantastic summaries. So may I invite the chair and the panelists to come here. Please stay all here. We just directly go to the closing panel. Thank you.
La moderadora es Anne-Brigitte Albrechtsen, subdirectora ejecutiva del Fondo de Población de las Naciones Unidas, y los panelistas que nos acompañan en esta oportunidad son Muchiri Nyaka, director general del Instituto de Investigación de Desarrollo Local de Kenia; Daniela Baluares, asesora superior de Desarrollo para el Secretariado de Estados de los Estados Unidos de América; Pali Lejola, estadística general de Estadísticas de Sudáfrica; y William Hoffman, del Foro Económico Mundial.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. It gives me great pleasure to be up here, and I've certainly enjoyed the 2 of the 3 days I've been here and engaging with you and listening to the conversations. Now, I know that you all think that you're done working, and that you're just going to sit there and slowly snooze, and then you're going to go off into the sunshine. But I thought that now that we've listened to a lot of interventions, I'd start by giving you a little task that you can spend 5 minutes on, and then I'll call on you. Because we all know that as exciting as these 3 days have been, if we don't all go back and do things slightly differently than when we came here, we may have learned something, but it won't really lead to the transformative action we're looking for. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk to the person next to you about the specific action that you individually will take to make a difference and make the data revolution make a difference in the lives of individuals. So the specific action you will take, and then I'll call on you, just like a teacher, and ask you to tell us what that action will be. So 3 to 5 minutes of buzzing, energetic buzzing, I hope, right now. Okay. I hate to stop this activity and engagement. Can I have your attention up here at the stage again? And maybe what I'll do is I can see a gentleman. I don't know what his name is, but he's talking to Gina. So right there in the middle, you are talking so actively. I'm sure you've got a whole list of actions that you are going to carry out when you get back to your job. So can you get up and tell us what those actions are? Yes.
Yes, well, my name is Jeff Kinezovich, and my passion kind of sprung from a violent reaction to Emmanuel at the last plenary, where he suggested that you need to be a data scientist with a PhD in order to visualize data. And I think this whole event would be a failure if we left people feeling that less empowered to create their own visuals. So my promise, or the thing that I was going to go out there and do, is to make sure that people are aware that there are so many evolving technologies to help support data visualization that are designed to be user-friendly, that can get you a lot of the way there, and to show people how to do that and build capacity in that area.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a hand and thank you for that action. Now, I could ask for hands. Come on, who's very excited about going back and doing action in the next week? Over here. Go on. Please. No. Well, I can't. There was somebody behind a pillar, no? Or was that you? Go. Yeah, come. Go ahead.
Well, yes, certainly. I'm very excited to be thinking about a few new things we could be doing. Well, basically, we're trying to figure out the best way to measure global social indicators. And I came here to meet you guys in the policy world. I'm with a tech company. And which shall remain nameless. And having these it's been really great talking to you guys and understanding where you're coming from and basically what your needs would be. And I'm very, very happy to be here for that. And I look forward to continuing talking to a lot of you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you, because I know that what you didn't say is that you've committed to going back and really thinking very hard about how we use social media to track early marriage, for example, which is a key issue on the agenda of the post-2015 development agenda. So there's a real specific action there as well. I see a lady in a green dress, I think. Or a guy, sorry, I can't see because sorry, I've got a light shining in my face.
We're engendering the data revolution, don't worry. I'd like to confess that I did not realize how critical and vital a lot of the registration and civil registration and vital statistics are. And I'd like to make a call to people focused on that area and technology companies like one that I represent called Geopol, that we can use mobile phones, we can use technology to jump ahead. For example, right now a census is enumerated in the US through a mail survey. What if we used mobile phones and we completed more registration information that way more rapidly? So I'm charged to work more exclusively and more closely with these types of groups in order to just make that leap, move towards self-completion for registration as well as for census, so that maybe you cover 60–70% of the people like you can in the US Census with a mail survey, and then you jump and you make sure everyone else is counted. But let's use low-hanging fruit and technology to shorten the registration and census processes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, please go ahead as soon as you get a microphone.
Philip from Kenya. One concrete step is to convene a national partnership on development data. We've already, because of technology, and Kenya is way ahead of us, We've already got authority from the Office of the Deputy President. So we're going to do that next week. And we've already agreed with a couple of the Africa group. Secondly is to do a South-South capacity exchange with Colombia. So we've already also started that conversation.
Okay, fantastic. Real action on the ground. That's excellent. Okay, back there.
Bernard Naidu from Statistics South Africa. I think I like these 4 words that came up: capacity, literacy, partnership, engagement. And I think it's so relevant for South Africa, because we tend to talk of big data and what we need to do and what we collect. But what comes to my mind is that there are many people in my country who don't even have the data we already produce. We talk of now a census, now we want to do another census, but a large percentage of them haven't seen the 2011 census, especially at small area level. So I think when we go back, we need to continue to focus on this capacity building and partnership to make sure people start using what is available first before they start complaining about what's not there.
Thank you very much. And you'll obviously take the lead on that as soon as you get back home. Now, hold your thoughts, because now I want to turn to our panel and get their reflections and actions, individual or through the organizations and networks and platforms that they represent, so that we take it from the vertical individual, the vertical tracks that you've heard on, into sort of a more horizontal global platform, and then we'll turn back to you both for suggestions for the panel up here, questions, as we move into the final closure. So here on the panel, Muchiri Nyaga, who I'm sure you've all seen and heard over the last few days, very active and engaged participant. And we're looking forward to hearing how, what you feel in terms of this particular festival and event, but also how you see moving this forward in the larger setting, both of course in Kenya, but also in Africa and globally. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This has been an awesome event, and I don't use the word awesome loosely, other than when I'm singing along to the theme song for the Lego movie. Yeah, it's my life's theme song. I love it. But just by a clap of hands, how many people here have made a connection with someone that you don't think you'd have met any other way, and it was a valuable connection and you're thrilled about it? Yeah. So I'd like to thank the organizers. They did a fantastic job, Claire, Philip. I mean, this was a very good start, and we're looking forward to seeing more of these, because we've learned from this event. And we're going to do events like this. And next time, you're getting invited. You're not going to be organizing them. This is very good. And one of the reasons why this is good for me, and some of you know this, is the kind of partnerships that emerge from these kind of gatherings. It's when you bring people together that wouldn't have met any other way. When you bring people into these spaces that are not typically present here, and then use your networks here to bring people who are maybe typical to this space, but not typical to the space you come from. So that cross-pollination is a big issue for me. It's something that I'd like to see more of. And we're talking about concrete actions just now. One of my concrete actions, of course, part of the work that's happening in Kenya and in Africa around, working with the state, convening with the other partners around a national partnership for development data, as well as an African partnership for development data. The other thing that's big for me is to bring organizations that I feel need to be very, very present. Actors that need to be very, very present at these spaces. I'm talking about parliamentarians. How many parliamentarians are here today? How many people from ministries of planning or planning commissions or Department of Planning? Those are two actors that are critical to the domestication of everything we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. We need them here. And the third constituency is organizations working on gender equality, women's rights, women's empowerment. How many are here? Yeah? That is very good, but next time you need to outnumber the big data people. Yeah, that's for me, the partnerships is a big issue, and I think it's both a place of action and a learning from this event. There are people working on dark populations. I'm talking about segments of our demographics that we don't have enough data on to plan. I'm talking about the elderly. That's why I'm a big fan of HelpAge being present at these spaces. I'm talking about pubescent girls and boys. I mean, they're parts of this world where we need to have policy intervention specifically for that demographic, and the data doesn't exist at the level that we can do something about it. We need to, one of the things that I'm also taking out of this, and I'm encouraging all of us to think about, is involving our governments at the highest levels possible. That's one of the lessons we are applying immediately in Africa. And that's something that I'd like to encourage you not to get afraid or fatigued by dealing with bureaucracy and politicians, but let's make the investment to actually do that. And probably just a couple of other things that have emerged from the tracks that presented earlier and what I've heard from people, things that I think are very important. One is the centrality of public participation. We need to make this about people. We need to empower them to participate. And there are some things that make it difficult for them to participate. And that includes their agency, their citizen agency. And if they're not registered, they don't exist. If they don't exist, they can't participate. So I was glad to hear the gentleman talk about civil registration and vital statistics. We need to improve the coverage of that as soon as possible. There are those of us working, local researchers working within the regions in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Europe and America, who are doing work in their regions on issues like this. You know, we need to learn from what they're doing before we fly in and try to do something, you know, from them. So I'm hoping that we're at the tail end of parachute development. Let's learn from what people are doing and the researchers who are there, but then also not totally disregard what outsiders are seeing. An outsider will always have a perception that you'll completely miss. So the NYU, for instance, have done some amazing work. IDS in the UK have done amazing work, and it's informing some of our own work in Africa, for instance. And I think bringing the centrality of the citizen and participation to the conversation is something that's come up here, of course, with the data shift as well, the aspiration to get citizen-generated data that's comparable into the policy spaces. That's also big. Yeah, so I think it's been great. Next steps, I know that's something that we're talking about right now. Of course, being from Africa and the work that we're doing there, I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty proud of what we're doing. We've just come out of the Addis meeting a few weeks ago. What came out of a meeting in Addis was the Africa Data Consensus. That is now giving us the political platform to engage it. We now have political will at the continental level, and that's a process that's going to end up at heads of state towards the middle of the year. That's a fantastic opportunity for us, and I think that gives us the leverage to drive these conversations to the highest levels possible. Because without that level of political will, talking about data and resourcing national statistics offices and making legislative changes to allow for data from new sources to come in, which is one of the revolutionary things about the data revolution, it will be really almost impossible. We have UNFPA coming up. We have, of course, the SDGs, and then the National Statistics Office is dealing with the indicators. All these are things that require political will, and we're hoping that we're going to stay ahead of the curve, at least on our continent, in making sure that these things happen.
Thank you, Muchiri. And I mean, what an amazing set of both reflections and comments. I think a big takeaway for me is that we've spent 3 days together, mainly as the generators, the gatherers, the analysts, and even the visualizers of data, without really being in the room with the users of data. We've talked about the users, but we have really not spent time with the users. And I think that's a key point, the pointing out of the parliamentarians, the various policy committees of national government, even in large respect sort of in the global policy space. But let me just turn now to you, Daniela. I mean, you are very much in that global policy space of advising the US government, both up to the Financing for Development conference and the summit on the Sustainable Development Goals and the post-2015 agenda. What are your takeaways? What are your actions? And how can we help translate everything that we've heard here into that policy space?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks to the organizers for a truly awesome event. It's been a really kind of substantive and dynamic couple of days. And for me personally, it's rare to be with a group of people that's so, I feel so comfortable with, given kind of the various stages of my life now in the policy world, but previously as a social entrepreneur with a big focus on data and early in my undergraduate studies an engineer. So this has been truly a group that's brought all those streams together and is such a like-minded group of people who are trying to drive change. So that's been really exciting. To this specific question of how does this now fit into the policy realm? And just to say, you know, the year ahead, 2015, is kind of unprecedented in terms of the nature of global policy agreements that we're going to be, that will culminate all at once in the months ahead. This is both an opportunity and a risk, but we have a financing for development agreement that will be concluded in July in Addis Ababa through the UN, negotiated through the UN. The Sustainable Development Goals, which will be culminated in a head of state summit in September in New York, where we'll really set goals for what the world wants to achieve by 2030. And then there's a climate agreement that will occur in Paris in December. And I think what started to happen in those processes is the recognition that data is absolutely central to enabling us to achieve these goals, to really know where we're going. And at the heart of the MDGs and now the Sustainable Development Goals has been the ability to really measure a policy agreement, which is not always typical. And that presents an opportunity, if we all seize it, to translate that into real action and to align efforts of many actors, civil society, business, and governments around common goals. But there's also a risk that those goals don't translate into action if there's not sufficient engagement from people like you, from citizens, et cetera. So there's a real road ahead for translating policy into action, using these moments where there is a recognition from policymakers that data is essential, even if there's not the full experience of using it in every realm in government. So I would just, I think, encourage all of you, just as we're encouraging in the policy space, to seize this opportunity. And just to add to that, that opportunity is both as in the agreement of the Sustainable Development Goals and having really measurable outcomes, but also has been present in the discussion on financing for development. And that financing for development agreement, which is the third of its kind. The first one dates back to Mexico and Monterrey in 2002. Has really, those agreements have spoken to how do we achieve our development goals, not only from financing, but also what are the things that we need to implement the goals. And data has also been featured in the negotiations on that agreement and presents another opportunity to recognize the asset that data can be to all of our efforts. So I think we are really working to use those opportunities as well to highlight things that governments can do, businesses can do, to both release data, to increase the usage like we're all talking about here today. The one other thing that I'll just flip to is, so we have this moment, we have this policy moment, it can drive action. I think one of the things that can help with that, and also just much more broadly as an opportunity, is how do we really start celebrating our data heroes and the stories about data driving change from a policy level, from a citizen level, et cetera. And I've met lots of data heroes over these days, and I just wanted to encourage having a couple of those key stories where we've seen data chain really drive all the way through to policy change, to change on the ground, to change in people's lives. And I know there are many, but I just wanted to talk to two that have come to mind while I've been here. One isn't in the social change realm, but I was thinking about back to my undergraduate days 20-odd years ago when there was far less focus on data and technology. We didn't have the internet yet. But the hero then, in the realm of engineering that I was doing, was Edward Deming. So for any of you know that he was of the total quality management fame. And he was credited with using statistics to drive dramatic improvements in manufacturing of cars. So and at that time, changing manufacturing in Japan had led to higher quality at lower cost cars, for instance. But he was really a bit of a nerdy guy who'd really seen how you could use statistics, create these charts around statistics that showed when manufacturing systems weren't working, and change entire industries. And there was a whole set of total quality management was kind of a buzzword in the business world then, et cetera. So that was then. And who are the heroes today that use that same kind of change, and where are the examples? And I think a recent, not over the last decade or so, not so recent one that came to mind in the social good space is in HIV, where we did see the combination of data on the extraordinary burden of disease in the late 90s and early 2000s, finally breaking through to the policy level, the data on the lack of resources to address it, breaking through with advocates across the globe coming together, and then real action in terms of both resources and changes in policies and changes in action that then have led to very dramatic change in things like access to medicines and reductions in burden of disease. So I look forward to really celebrating more of those stories and those data heroes as we look to get to these policy agreements in the year ahead.
Thank you very much, Daniela, and thank you for reminding us really of the very special time in history that we stand before right now. I mean, the combination of Addis, the summit in September, and hopefully a climate agreement in December is really a truly transformative time for all of us, and it's very special to be part of that and to play a small or a big role in that, and whether that small role is collecting small data for change and being that hero is very special. It does remind me of some heroes that I've spoken to recently, which really are data heroes in a very, very special way. The UN system have some 2,000-3,000 young volunteers in the 3 Ebola-affected countries, moving from village to village, capturing information about individuals, the health status of individuals. They've been given mobile phones. They are bringing that data back to the central places to make sure that anybody who's potentially affected is quarantined, that their families are dealt with, that various specific measures are taken to address that particular disease. Now that's a data hero living right now and using data and technology to stop the spread of Ebola. These are the kinds of stories, but also all sorts of other stories that we need to get out there to show how data can transform and save lives in an everyday way. So, Haishan, how can the World Bank, with everything that you're working on, with everything that you've heard, with the commitment that you've seen here over the last 3 days, how can you take some of this forward and use your multilateral clout and to help spur this forward and use the revolution for the greater good?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me start by getting off track a little bit. Before I came here, after having been asked to speak here, so I came with a little bit of anxiety, thinking, God, I have to talk. But just the day before I came, you know how social media change our lives or affect us. Someone posted something on my Facebook. It's something by Dalai Lama saying, if you speak, you only talk about what you know. But when you listen, you might learn something new. I was like, I can't ignore Dalai Lama. And I'm coming here to a very historical gathering. That is, we're from different strands of data work. We might have been talking among ourselves, be it from technology forms, you interact there, and be it from national statistical systems, we talk among UN intergovernmental processes among the national statistical statisticians, or you're from NGOs. But we rarely have an opportunity to come together to look at the challenges that we collectively face. So I said, I'll just come with the listening mode. And I'm really grateful for the flash talk kind of format we have had at this meeting. 2 minutes, you focus on the issue, and then you start listening to what else will come. So I'm really want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, but all the participants who have made this historical event such a success, because what we're facing is this huge imbalances in the world when it comes to development data. You have companies using nano data, predicting what will be the color of my next pair of shoes. But at the same time, we still don't have data to monitoring some of the basic development challenges, such as poverty, and the time lag and the missing data. It's this total imbalance definitely requires something not short of a revolution. And this means that the national systems must come together with the private sectors generating data in a different way. The conventional approach has to meet the new method and new sources, and innovation will have to come in to inject what we will need to leapfrog and where we will need to take up new ways of doing things. So a real partnership will have to happen. This partnership will take different forms, but a forum like this will give us a space to begin to talk with each other, to bring our mind together to explore what would be the new solutions to the problem we're facing, so persistent but also emerging. So I think this is really a very historical event, and I almost think this is a dry run of what the Data Revolution report has recommended as a world forum on development data, which will bring this global partnership together. This partnership doesn't mean global at a global space as what we're doing here now, but rather starting from here, but also to see how it's going to be organized at regional, national, and community level, because this kind of partnership must be inspired and materialized at a level that will really generate real results. So with that, I just want to quickly respond to you. From World Bank, we see the value of really helping to forge this partnership and nurture it and foster it. Therefore, we would very much committed to work with all of you to transform this Data Fest into a real-world forum on development data in the months and years ahead, in order for us to really create the data revolution that we desire through this forum. At the same time, I think what has become very clear is that while the private sector has been chasing data work, responding to the market signals and investing in it as a real sector of economy and a business sector, on the government and public side, we're lagging behind. But I think the thinking is really evolving so fast. That is, I'm so glad in the Data Revolution report, development data is being positioned as development data in its own right. This is a fundamental shift in our thinking, and we will need to continue to advocate and promote. We talk a lot about the economy of development data. We don't talk enough about the economics of data. The value of data in what we're pursuing, what we're doing, is need to be reflected in how we count our growth and development. And here, I would want to echo what Daniela was just said. It is important for us to demonstrate through real stories and real experience what data or how the data can help us transform how we do development. But at the same time, we also need to engage seriously with the development economics community to really conceptualize and also to really gauge and develop our thinking in demonstrating what would be the investment in data will bring us in terms of growth gains and development gains in the different aspects of human development. And this also relates to how the development agencies or a big development bank, such as the World Bank, to support data development in our client countries. This means that we'll really need to integrate data work, the priorities in different countries into the country diagnostic and into the country program. That means that we will need to really integrate supporting or financing for data in the lending program that we're designing. But this will need to be done first foremost by recognizing investing in data requires domestic sustainable investment. This is government fundamental responsibility, and this has to be done at the country level. But international support is very important while country is moving towards this sustainable financing domestically, and international support will be very important. And at the same time, we also need to incentivize private sector investment in supporting development data business. So at the same time, certain investment, especially when it's come to innovation, it's very important that we do it through a collective, coordinated approach, because individual countries might be very difficult to summon the kind of resources and the technical connectedness and expertise to pursue it individually. So by considering all of this, I think it's very important. Not only, I think we will continue to promote this shift in how International Development Bank invests in data in supporting client country data initiative through financing and lending programs. We also need to come together to create certain collective financing facilities to complement the domestic and this kind of development lending programs. That's also why that the World Bank is working closely with many bilateral, multilateral donors for development data to think about how to create a financing facility, perhaps hosted by the World Bank, to support our collective effort to improve the fundamental national statistical system capacity to produce the core development data, but at the same time to support innovation to help us to do the business better, but also to bring elements into how we do development data. So on both fronts, I think bank is committed to support this global effort. And definitely, as Daniela and others pointed out, the next few months will be very critical how we organize this effort. But I just want to end by saying that it's wonderful through this data festival we have come together. Let's remain members of this new community, because we're going to have to grow in order to meet our challenge together.
Thank you very much. Also, just for making it plain that those of us that are donors in this room, whether we are bilateral or multilateral, etc., need to align to the needs at the national level to build capacity, to take full advantage of the new innovations and the new technology, and that those investments are needed, and probably more than we've done so far. So thank you very much for also putting on the table the possibility of a new funding platform for this, and we'll look forward to hearing a lot more on that. Bill, World Economic Forum has clearly over the years shown how data, you've brought data to policymakers, to global leaders through many different forums. How do you see this event, and what actions are you looking to take forward from here?
Great, thank you. I see all you, and I think starting up it was about us, right? I forget the gentleman's name, but we need us. And so for the organizers and the people that put this fantastic week together, once again, maybe look at the person to the left or right and say, nice to meet you, because I think ultimately that's going to get us through to the other side. In addition, just to thank the people that organized it, this was done with operational excellence. And this is a highly complex, crazy group of people. So for all the things we didn't see, all the things that didn't go wrong, kind of a shout out to the people behind the scenes that really just made this thing flawless. So I've spent some time pulling off events like this. There's a lot of long hours and nights. So just thank you to the people that stayed up till 2 in the morning worrying about us. Now I might kind of play around a bit. In the spirit of the data revolution, one might consider that all 3 words might be wrong. First, the. That's an article. That usually means a noun. And I think what we're talking about is a process, change. And it's about listening. It's about inclusion. It's about bringing in other individuals that simply aren't in the room right now. And if we can recognize this more of a verb, and that comes from Lawrence Lessig and a bunch of other people, so please, that's not me. But this is a verb, not a noun. And it's about change, and it's about bringing in new relationships that we simply haven't been able to discover before. And so what I think we're looking for is a new way to discover new relationships in a variety of different ways. And someone mentioned it too, we love and hate this stuff. These relationships may or may not work out. And so we need the trust, we need the accountability, we need the due process to build the world that we individually want. Second word, data. I stopped counting how many times people say it's not the data. It's not, right? We put so many adjectives in front of the word data: small, open, big, large, owned, private, personal. When we start to do that, just as a knowledge, mind shift, we're really talking about a use of data, about information, about the governance. Is this fair? Is it equitable? Is it inclusive? And so I think the other element of let's generally, for the next days going forward, to recognize that data is an inert thing, right? It's the carbon in this room, right? But when you use and extract value from it, then we're talking about information. And I could say that in any room and anybody gets it, and that's just kind of general awareness. I think where this group is uniquely qualified is we can collectively take it to knowledge. And that's where we apply the knowledge and judge for ourselves, is that right? Is that fair? Is that good? Is this what we want? And so I think where we could really start to push people is the knowledge. And in that space, we're not listening, right? And so to Haishan's words and so many other people in the room, we need to listen, right? And there's so many incentives to go with this techno-utopian big data vision, which is great, but I think we also need to understand what challenges, what questions do we want to use, and we just need to listen. So I think that's the other element, is if we can pivot more towards a listening and engagement. Now I'll start waving my arms around about the importance of human-centered design and why that matters, and yes, that's a buzzword. But as a link into the private sector, you go to Silicon Valley, you go to the Mobile World Congress, you look at the billions and trillions of dollars being invested in the mobile infrastructure. The reason why we basically all have iPhones in our pockets, right, is design. Right? And they listened, and it was intuitive, and nobody really knew what we were going to get until they showed it to us. But this notion of design is important. And what I think is really cool is that when you listen to the business community, the word that keeps coming up more and more frequently is empathy. And to me, one of the strongest things that happened at the event was up in the innovation room, the VR thing, and I think it was self-described as an empathy machine. And that blew me away. Right? And so how can we feel the data? How can we use the data? Those words in particular came from the folks at the UN Global Pulse folks. John Crowley, who's working that, says the people that are practicing need to have dirt on their boots before they touch the data. So I think that would be another kind of big takeaway for me, is the empathy. The last one, the revolution, and by no means am I any type of political scholar, but I think it might be a data rebellion. And I say that because, A, there are real political dynamics here. And collectively, it's a little tough to kind of toss that word out there. But I think ultimately, what we might be, talking about is an ascendant kind of rebellion where sovereign individuals have unprecedented control, right decision-making about their own lives, either individually, collectively, or societally. And when you look back at some of the rebels, right, that have had really transformational change, there was a lawyer from India that spent some time in South Africa. There's a lot of people we all look up to that had a lot of courage. And so I think as a community, looking for those voices, those individuals, that really, it's not about incremental institutional change, i.e. a revolution. This might be something bigger. And so I'd offer that one up as another word. And lastly, I would say let's stop calling it anything. It kind of is, right? And labels are going to end up tricking us up. So we can feel it, we can see it, we can touch it, because this is a highly complex system that's unknown and unknowable, right? And we all have different perspectives, but I think one of the big elements is to more effectively embrace complexity as a science and as a domain, and get more systems designer people in here, start to recognize at a systems level, what are we doing? And use that to inform the right data points, the right measurements, and then we can measure the world we want. But until we really start to recognize this as a dynamic systems element, my concern is we'll default back to all of our kind of institutional, teaching and learnings, and won't really be embracing it. So I think in terms of an action, broad, strong, global research at a systems level of understanding all the different perspectives and really starting to look at how collectively we can architect this with empathy, then I think that would be a concrete step. And one last thing in terms of the actions and the conversation going forward, institutionally as a forum, we do convene at a global level. And so I would say one of the key objectives is to galvanize the support for that. And so when you unpack galvanize, that's a shock, right? That's an electric shock that goes into metal. And so some leaders are going to get shocked, right? They may or may not like it, so we have to be ready for those reactions. But I think with that will come a much stronger support, the courage, the leadership to stand up and go, yeah, this is not radical change. This is change that collectively gives us a more stable and predictable system.
Thank you very much, Bill, and please, just for now, give a round of applause for this first round with our fantastic panelists, because we do actually have time with all this food for thought, with the dissection of the 3 days, with the collection of it again, and looking at it at that horizontal level in terms of global engagement around this. I want to open the floor again, both to allow those of you that are sitting there, just can't wait to tell us which action you're going to take next week or in the next 2 weeks, because we're not going to let you off the hook on that one, but also to ask questions or comment or to reflect on what's been said up here in the last 20 minutes. So let me see from you. And give you an opportunity to have some of the final words, if not the final word. I saw a hand there in the middle. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lucas from the Hewlett Foundation. I'm so grateful for this conversation because it reminds us that all of the technical discussions that we've been having this week, be it around geo-big data or measuring the SDGs or multidimensional poverty measures, that technical conversation happens in a political context. And the political context, I think, has been very vibrant at the sector level or the country level probably for years. But this is the year, as Daniela said, for the global political context around these issues. And so I want to put on the table an action that everyone in this room can take. Everyone in this room is either in or regularly engages with someone from government, someone from the private sector, someone from civil society, or someone from a multilateral organization. So ask those people 3 questions. One is, what data will you open or share this year in this political moment? 2, how will you use new or traditional data sources to better understand and address development challenges? And 3, who will you partner with that you haven't partnered with before? If we can get a critical mass of governments, multilaterals, NGOs, private sector to stand up together at any one of these political platforms that we have this year and say we are jointly together opening, using, and partnering in new ways, that will be a victory, because we will not only keep the political momentum alive, but we'll actually have new uses and new data to use to solve development challenges. All of us can do that. So let's not delay. Start talking to each other now. What will you share? What will you use? And how will you use it? And who will you partner with?
Fantastic. Thank you. But let's not, I want to see a show of hands. Who's actually going to go and do that within the next 3 months? See? We can do it. Okay. More suggestions, comments. At the very back. Yeah, more or less. Almost very back.
Thank you. My name is Ulrich Manns. I work for Leiden University in The Hague. And it's really exactly what's just been said. The political momentum is growing, and we have so many, well, there's so much expertise in The Hague already in terms of international law and arbitration and litigation, etc. We want to make sure that this type of expertise is being used when we come into a space where big data is being used and where things will come up where you might need a third party, you might need organizations that come up. There's a couple of very interesting ideas that came up here during the conference, Knowledge Hub, showcase projects on people-centered accountability, etc. We're in very close discussions with a couple of larger organizations in The Hague, and we'll take that forward. We'll build alliances around this and to make sure that there are showcases, one, and two, that we, and that's an invitation to all of you, come to me with a couple of questions you have in terms of what you might need in terms of an international global governance scheme. What is it that needs to be in place in the medium and longer term that when data is being shared and it is being put to use, what is needed in terms of regulations, standards, principles, ethical agreements, certification schemes, third-party mechanisms? We don't know. It's an emergent discussion, and we will take that forward in basically next week already. So,
thank you very much for that offer. That's fantastic. I think we probably have some, the part of the room I can't see, so please go ahead.
Sorry, don't know where to look. My name is Adelaida Trujillo. I'm from Colombia, but we lead a communication platform, global and Latin America. And thank you again for organizing this really interesting event. I think my task would be, we have a platform of 50,000 users in Latin America, and as Philip from CEPEI has been saying for the last year, Latin America needs to be more furtherly engaged in this discussion. I think as a majority of us know, we're now middle-income countries still with huge gaps. And just to back our Kenyan colleague, I think the need for this to be at the mayor's levels, not only parliamentarians, but local mayors, federal governments. We are in a decentralized scheme, and we're a bit out of the cooperation scenario. So I think the fact that we're in Cartagena, for those of us that are Latin or are Colombians, is to communicate further what this is all about. And in my capacity as a communicator and media person, I would also push for not only data journalism, which uses rigorously the use of data for better reporting, but also to empower people to understand what data is about as communicators and to actually use it to hold decision makers accountable. So it's different. It's not only data journalism, but it's also communication about data and empowerment and social mobilization around the use of data as power. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The other side of the room that...
Hello. Hello, my name is Catalina from Macaya, also from Colombia. I think that one of the key actions that I'm going to take next week is that we are a nonprofit support organization, and I feel that we have the responsibility to bridge this knowledge and technical gap from these high-level discussions to nonprofits and grassroots organizations that are doing on-the-ground work. This seems like a very foreign language and conversations to them, and they are the ones that are actually delivering social services, capturing information. So we need to make sure that they are engaged in this conversation, because they are not. I think just the low participation of civil society organizations here in this event is an important measure of how we are not very active in these conversations. So that's what I'm taking back home. I'm located in Medellin. We work with many social organizations. We also have a platform with more than 600 nonprofits and social organizations registered in Latin America. So we're going to make a big effort in communicating this to them and, again, bridging this knowledge and technical gap with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And really thank you for also reminding us that one thing is feeding this upwards. The other thing is really to feed it down and out and into communities and into the individual, put information and knowledge into the hands of individuals that can also help take advantage of this. So I'll take 2 or 3 more, and then we'll have a quick round of closure.
Thanks.
You have the microphone, so.
I try to do it in English. Sorry if no. It was said before, stop using PDF. I also would have stopped using new labels, putting new labels, fancy names to this movement of open data. And I'm saying that because I have just 2 years following this movement, the open data movement, and in each event, there's a new label, new fancy name, you know? It's hard to catch up. And what I'm trying to say is that we have to understand that the countries are running in different velocities in the open data movement. In my country, in Bolivia, the open data movement is trying to get better internet. It's trying to get in a new transparency and accountability law. Whether in other countries, they are discussing how much data is good to be disaggregated. So you understand, it's at different velocities. And we have to understand that because it's not in our hands to close the gaps between rich and poor people. It's not in our hands. But it is in our hands, here in all of us, to close these gaps inside the movement we have. No? We have to build first the basis in countries like in South America and Latin America, rather than catch up with you, that you are running. We are just giving the first steps. So we have to take that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I see a hand in the middle of right there. You now have the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Margarita. When I was asked by Jürgen, that was easy. Getting the name was pretty difficult for me. For him, was easier. It's like a island, a drink, or a pizza, or a Colombian actress, if I'm right. I'm here representing 400,000 individuals who have registered with us at the online volunteering service. They have come to us saying, I want to participate, I want to do something, give me the opportunity. We have stories of women who have finished their PhDs, have had families, and then all of a sudden they are out of the working force and they want to participate, they have the knowledge, they have the drive. And we have also individuals who come to us who are UN spouses, and because they are constantly changing countries, they are also out of the workforce. We have also development practitioners who have gone to difficult countries and have had accidents, and all of a sudden are also out of the working force and want to participate. They want to volunteer, they have the knowledge and the drive to do it. I'm here simply asking for you to give them the opportunity by being online volunteers. They can be everywhere in the world and connect with you. They have the knowledge, and I know that here is Mitchell, to me, for example. Don't ask me about what the online volunteers do. They have helped with the My World survey. They can translate websites also with Paul for the translation of the people voices. So please, also with Wingo, online volunteers are behind all of them. So I am terribly shy. Don't ask me, ask them. They can tell you all about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the floor and reminding us of the enormous assets that are available to all of us as we try and help shape transformation around this particular agenda or any other in terms of the massive global movement of volunteers. Thanks for that. One more right next to you, since that's where closest to the mic, and sorry to anybody else.
Hi, I'm from HelpAge International, and just want to say that it's really great that older people are being included in these discussions, and it's great to hear Machiri say that he's a big fan of Help Age as well. One of the really concrete things that I'm going to take forward from this is to work with DataShift to work on some data we've already collected from older people in Tanzania on health and access to health services for them, and look at how we can collect that more efficiently through SMS and mobile technology.
Thank you very much. And now let's give us all a really big hand for all the actions and proposals and commitments that have been shared with us during this last hour. I think that's fantastic. I know there's more, and we just have to keep that spirit alive. I'm going to give the panelists just a minute each to share with you any final thoughts, nuggets, reflections, and then I'm going to spend 2-3 minutes myself trying to not summarize 3 days, but to give you some thoughts as we move into a more festive closure. Go ahead.
Thank you. In 30 seconds. Well, okay, I just lost 10 right there. One of the things that I'd like to emphasize, and I know belabor the point, but Pali Lehaola from the Statistics South Africa, the Director General, who spoke on the first day, and he mentioned two things that I think we need to keep in mind. One is the issue of ownership. The issue of ownership around these processes, especially those around data at the local, at the regional level. That's important. That's one of the reasons we are working really hard to make sure that we have an African consensus that is moving and a partnership that is evolving from that, because we need to have that. Second thing is the context for development is not data. You know, I know I repeat something that's been said quite a bit, but data is part of the reality. So by keeping data in its place, we're probably going to achieve a whole lot more. So let's remember that there are concrete policy interventions that need to be done in order to drive, to reduce inequality and to drive progress. There's all this work going around on multidimensional poverty indicators. There's the work on CRVS. There's the work that countries need to do around the national strategies for development of statistics. There's the work that we need to do to make sure that multiple stakeholders come to the table when we're talking about data in the various countries that we come from. Some of that is not a technical conversation around big, medium, small, micro, nano data. It's about a slightly less technical conversation around the politics and the policy of data. So let's maintain a 360 view of the space that we are working in. Thank you.
Thank you, Machiri. On to you, Daniela.
Is that okay? Well, first, I actually wanted to pick up on what Sarah Lucas said in her intervention, that this really, with this year ahead, for all of us to seize this opportunity to, one, open what data can we open, how can we invest to increase the usability of that data, and then how can we partner differently to achieve that. And that's something from a U.S. perspective we're challenging ourselves to do, both domestically and with our own domestic open data efforts, and also in our international engagement in sectors like health and in agriculture and in gender and climate change. So that really just to reinforce and encourage others to come along, and the many actors that are here who are doing that, to do more of that. And the second, I think, just to highlight is gender data, the gender data gap. I don't think it can be spoken to often enough, and that gender data gap is both in the lack of availability still of some key gender disaggregated data. We don't really know what poverty looks like for women across the globe. There's still many issues where we lack disaggregated data. And secondly, even the data we know is still really underutilized. I'm always struck by the amount of analysis that has been done by the IMF, by investment banks, that says closing the participation gap of women in the economy is enormous potential driver of economic growth. Countries could grow their GDP by up to 20%. A quarter of the growth in Europe between 1995 and 2008 was due to closing the female participation gap in the economy, but you still don't always see action against that. And then the third piece on the gender data gap is we need enough women who are the data heroes. And I know they're out there, but we don't hear enough about them. There's more here than in many similar data-oriented conferences, but making sure that women data heroes are a big part of the picture. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Haishan. Final thought you want to leave us with?
Final thought. No, I just want again to say how much I appreciated this opportunity and for all the things I learned new. Thank you all. Let's cherish Cartagena, but move forward. So you're all invited to this consultation this afternoon. So let's put our mind together to see what will be our next actions.
And Bill.
Great, thank you. I'll speak on behalf of a private sector gap that might be missing in the room. I think one element is just to strengthen the engagement on new types of public-private data sharing agreements, and that's a risk-based kind of lens that we need to look through. And so in particular, starting to identify in more precise terms the impacts, the benefits and the harms, and what are most likely and most severe, so that we can have a much more granular and focused conversation with private sector actors and recognize that there's access to data and then there's access to questions that data can query. And so I think the nature of the engagement with business needs to evolve, but clearly there's tremendous incentives and just significant opportunity. The second level is the governance, the trust, the accountability at multiple levels, at multiple scales, but we need new stakeholders and we need new ways to go through the ethics and the governance of data. There's entities that are forming, we're engaged in that as well, but I think separate than just the nature of the agreements are the bodies that can oversee. And then lastly, just to repeat myself, is the research, the understanding at a systemic level that includes local voices and individuals, and how do we more effectively bring those local voices to the needs, and how do we, in very precise terms, not only recognize individuals as information consumers, but data producers. And so if we really want to have an economic revolution / rebellion, recognizing every individual as a data producer will significantly change the economics of what I'll call the digital economy.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thanks to all our panelists for shaping and putting everything that we've done in the last 3 days into that global context. Now, I wanted to just very briefly, in closure, try and help us all hold on to the essence of what we've been through today. And Bill, you've decomposed the words, the data revolution, and reshaped that. And I think what we don't need is, we don't need an action plan right now. We don't need necessarily a meeting report. What we need to carry away from this is really the Cartagena spirit. And I like the word spirit, not just because we are in the place that has inspired so many Gabriel Garcia Marquez novels, but really the spirit is something that we have to carry with us out of this room to all our next engagement, be that with individuals or with policymakers around the world. Now, that the elements of that spirit, as far as I've been able to see and hear from you, really is that we came together here, not because we had to, not because somebody in a resolution at the UN had said we've got to get people together and they've got to fix this and they've got to do certain things. We all came together because we wanted to. We've been driven, not by politics and power, but we've been driven by professional curiosity, by an enormous opportunity to be part of a global change process, and by a real sense of urgency, because we're all working with an asset that is so desperately needed to shape that the policy making of the next 5, 10, 15 years. And what we've also done while we've been here is that we've accepted complexity. We've embraced diversity. We've broken down silos in our engagement. And we've created very deliberate tension because in creative tension, we've been able to see new opportunities for moving forward. We've respected each other's differences, and we've learned from them. And it's in that tension between the traditional and the new that all countries will help radically expand data. Data capture, acquisition, analysis, visualization, and most importantly, of course, utilization of data for sustainable development. And throughout the conversation, and that's my third point, and it's been said many times, it's been said in this panel, but just to reiterate the point, we've held on to the basic premise that data, big, medium, small, open, whatever it is an enabler for policy making, for social transformation, for citizen engagement, and above all, for protecting the individual human rights of every single human being on the face of this earth. And that basic premise to allow everybody to be counted and to be counted on for the contribution that they can make to social transformation. But we've also held on to the fact that there are so many that do not have the opportunity to take part in any revolution because they're not counted, because they're not part of it. And that's such a fundamental piece of any work that goes forward. And finally, we've created, and it's been said many times before, a very strong and very healthy appetite for stronger collaborative action, for greater partnerships as we move forward, both for taking all the knowledge and know-how in this room into global policy making for us, etc., but also whether that's Addis or whether it's the General Assembly, whether it's the climate conference, etc. But we've also built that sense of a need for collaboration at the country level, at the local level, at the community level, that all the assets that we have here can be translated and moved forward. And we have many different opportunities to take this forward, whether it's the Global Data Forum that we all hope will happen in 2016 with the spirit of Cartagena deeply embedded in that and a new way of doing things, a new way of engaging, but also in our everyday life. You've come up with your individual actions, and I think that the specific concrete activities that can be taken, say just next week, of calling a meeting, sitting people down, buying a cup of tea for a partner, and putting some of these actions into operation is very much part of the spirit that we've seen. We've also seen the spirit of continued need to experiment, to try, to learn together, and to capture the best lessons learned from that experimentation in some kind of shared platform. And I think when we meet again at 2:30, maybe we can talk about what would such a platform look like? How could that be taken forward? So just in closure from my side, it's a fantastic year. It's a year of tremendous hope, aspiration, opportunity for the world. Those of us that live and breathe international development. It's also a year where we all know that as we move forward, particularly in the first 5 years, say, of the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to be faced with enormous, not just complexity, but it's going to be really, really messy. There is no such thing as perfection out there, and there'll have to be a lot of trial and error. When we see the first national reports come out on the SDGs with huge data gaps, with a lot of cherry picking on which targets and goals to report on, with various deep omissions, deliberate or not so deliberate, in terms of reporting, we will start having a conversation about how to make that better. And everybody in this room will be part of, year after year, making the reporting, the accountability, and the actions for a better world come true simply by refining the basis, the databases, and the evidence for taking specific action. So thank you very much to everybody for your amazing engagement. It's been a fantastic event to be part of, and I look forward to seeing all of you again in the very near future. But don't go away. We have more actions to come, but we will get off the stage so other things can happen. Thank you.
Bueno, así damos por finalizada la plenaria de despedida. Le vamos a dar la palabra a Claire y a Philippe, los anfitriones del evento, para que despidan este espectacular festival. Muchas gracias a todos.
Well, that was quite some 3 days. When I stood up here on Monday morning, which seems like several weeks ago now, I said that I hoped that the next 3 days would be interesting and fun. I think we can safely say that it has been both, with the fun concentrated very much in last night's activities at the castle, and the interest spread evenly, I think, throughout the 3 days. It's been really fantastic. It's been because of a lot of people, and this is the part where we thank them all and we acknowledge the incredibly hard work that has gone into bringing us all here and keeping us busy. First of all, you will see on your seat when you sat down that you have evaluation forms for the conference. Please do fill them in and just leave them on the seat behind you when you go. It's really important for us to understand what you liked and didn't like so that we can improve future events of this kind. Secondly, it's been mentioned a couple of times, we're having a very informal consultation this afternoon about next steps so that we keep this momentum going over, as we've heard, all of the great opportunities of the next 12 months. That's going to be starting at 2:30 to give us all time to have a bit of a lunch beforehand, and it will be upstairs in training room 2, so please just come along. So, first of all, most importantly, let me thank all of you, all the 457 people who have been here over the last 3 days, for your enthusiastic participation, for your great ideas, and frankly, just for being really lovely people to spend 3 days with. So thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause. Secondly, of course, an event like this takes energy, it takes time, it takes people, it also takes money. And a large number of people have very generously provided us with the resources that have made this event possible. So we'd like to acknowledge and thank all of the donors involved. That was firstly the ODI Development Progress Project, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNDP, the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs, UNFPA, the Hewlett Foundation, the Datapop Alliance, and Paris 21. Between them all provided the resources that brought us here, that have allowed us to spend 3 days in this beautiful building. And of course, on the building and the venue for last night, we'd very much like to thank the city of Cartagena and the mayor personally for his remarks last night, and the government of Colombia for all the support they've shown to us in organising this event. So thanks to them. Now, obviously putting together all of the content that has been involved in all of the discussions over the last few days has taken, again, a huge amount of energy and time, just sitting in our offices at ODI and listening to all of the conversations that have been going on between the organisers of the different tracks, the different speakers, the people that have contributed their ideas and their thinking and their institutional energy in all kinds of ways. So we'd like to acknowledge the people who helped us, particularly to organise the different tracks. There's huge, as you saw from the programme, there are big teams that have been involved in putting together each track. And these were the Africa Centre for Technology Studies, the Mayor's Office of Cartagena de Indias, Civicus, DANE, Data 2X, the Fundación Gabriel García Márquez, Global Pulse, the Human Development Report Office we heard from Eva last night, the Ministry of Information Technology and Communications of Colombia, the One Campaign, the Open Data Institute, UNICEF, Social TIC, the World Wildlife Fund of Colombia, and the Centro de Innovación en Gobierno Electrónico. So many thanks to them for all the energy they put into the TRAC organization. Of course, it wasn't just the tracks, we also had a fantastic program of side events. And this was a late entry to the program where we realized that we had far more people wanting to do stuff and far more interesting ideas that we could possibly accommodate within the main conference program. So we put out a call to see if people would like to organize side events in some of the lunch hours. And we had a magnificent response of people dedicating a huge amount of time and energy into organizing those side events. And I was delighted to see how well they went, how busy, how full, and how buzzing they were. So thanks so much to all of you who put together those side events and made that work so well. So now we come on to some of the people that have helped us while we've been here over the last few days, and who've really been kind of looking after us so well as we've been here in the Casa and around the city of Cartagena. First of all, I don't know how many of you met them, but we've had a fantastic team of volunteers working around the place, just helping, keeping us on track, keeping everything going. So I don't know where they are. If the volunteers could make themselves visible and get a round of applause, please. Then, of course, very, very importantly, we have to thank wonderful Natalia Arias here, who has been keeping us on track through the plenary so beautifully. Then we have the team who've been in this room keeping it on track, all the translators that have done an amazing job with some quite difficult technical terms. And to Magix for the AV, all the headsets that you've been using so you can listen to the translators, to the caterers and all the staff here in the Casa who've really been magnificent in coping with our ever-expanding and sometimes, frankly, unreasonable list of demands. So thank you so, so much. Of course, we have to thank Chemateurs, who are our partners here in Cartagena, coping with all of the logistics. I'm sure most of you have interacted with them at some point over the last couple of days. They've just been fantastic in putting this whole thing together. We literally couldn't have done it without you. Then we've had a great comms effort as well, and you'll all have seen different parts of that. First of all, this magnificent cartoon that has been taking shape in front of our eyes very excitingly over the last few days. Thank you very much to Jorge Martin, who's been keeping that going. And we'd like to thank everybody who tweeted. You may not know this, but the hashtag Data2015 was actually trending in Colombia on the first day of the event, which is quite something. So everyone who tweeted, we thank you. And of course, everyone from around the world who's been joining us on the live stream. Some of you may still be there. Hello. And yeah, thank you for participating, even those of you who weren't able to make it to Colombia. Also, we've had a great stream running right through of other different things going on, showcasing other interesting things that people are doing with data. We want to thank all the organizations that took part in the Innovations Fair. I hope all of you managed to get up there and see it. Some of them may still be there if you want to run up after this and catch a quick look. And of course, the data artists who came and showed us how data is a raw material, not just for analysis, but also for creativity. So thank you all to them. Now we get to the organizing committee. Now I want you to see, I want it to be really obvious to everybody how big a team have been responsible for organizing this and just how many people were involved. So I'm going to say the name of each organization that's been involved in the committee. And if you can, when I say the name of your organization, if the whole team from that organization can please come up on the stage so everyone can really see how big a group and how fantastic a team of people have put this event together. So first of all, let me start with my colleagues from ODI. Come up. And also the fantastic team from CEPEI. And of course, UNDP. And Africa Gathering. Where are you? And Data Pop. Paris 21. And last but absolutely not least, UNFPA. Right, look at this. These are the people who brought you here. Big round of applause for them.
Well, I believe that every initiative and each of our projects always have a soul, it has a heart, it has these people that do not sleep for many weeks, who actually comply with everything what we dream of and then make it possible. And there are two persons that really made it happen. One sitting in London, making a wonderful job, sometimes leaving us all sleepless. And I believe we owe her not only a big round of applause, but also a big thank you for the hard work. Hannah, please stand up. And the other person I would like to thank is, on a personal note, my colleague, because she actually has all my numbers, so she really doesn't let me sleep when it comes to the Data Festival. And I owe her not only gratitude, but also great respect, and I'm very honored to have her as a colleague. Please, Priscilla Miranda. And, well, I was actually, when we all started this and had the imagination of making it happy, a happy event, a good event, I was invited by Claire to her house, and I found out that her son is actually a big fan of the Colombian soccer team. So I decided that she would take it away for him, and a big thank you to you for everything as well, Claire. So this is for you. Here you go. We can change it if it's too small. This is for you as well. Well, and now, as you know, we like surprises here in Colombia, usually when they're good. We have actually one from for the whole team, which I would like you to ask simply to step down a moment and look at the screen, since we have something for you to show you. So you can see it over here as well. So please go ahead and show us what we have for our colleagues. They can, so please step down there, yeah. Well, I have always said the best thing about a long journey is coming home. This time actually will be quite hard because I would love to stay in Cartagena with all of you and go on with the Data Festival. I cannot tell you when we're going to see us next time, but I hope it is soon, and I hope it is close to here, or maybe even here again. I have to convince Claire and the colleagues that this is a good idea for the future.
Not difficult.
And what else can you say than gracias, thank you, and goodbye. Have safe travels, come good home, and we hope to see you from our heart very soon. Thank you very much y gracias.